At a time, folks, when USC football is as intriguing, exciting, and creating as much attention as it has in years and years and years, we thought, hey, this is a great time to start a very exciting, what we hope to be, USC football show for you each and every week. So right now it's Tuesdays, 4 Eastern, 1 p.m. where it counts there on the West Coast, here at the Voice of College Football. And the only way we can make this really work, make it happen, is this guy who really has made our USC channel something of note here. We appreciate Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire. Matt, how you doing today?
Doing great. It's always a great time to talk USC football now that we're in the Lincoln Riley era. We have Clay Helton in the rearview mirror. You know, you rightly said USC is as intriguing as it's been in years after being as unintriguing and uninteresting as it was in 2021. So a 180-degree shift. We couldn't be happier.
So many of you are joining us and understand what we do here at the Voice of College Football. We've got 8 other team-specific live streams that we do throughout the week. So leave those comments and questions there in the live chat. And if you're new to this format, leave those comments and questions there in the live chat. We will get to as many as possible. We would love to do this as long as it's viable and makes sense. So please keep in mind your contributions count here on the Super Chat. And also, if you own a small business, would love to sponsor us here at the Voice of College Football USC, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail, and or are in contact with anyone who owns a small business, and we can outline how we can benefit you. All right, we're going to talk up the Trojans as we will each and every week. Again, 4 Eastern, 1 Pacific time. All right, Matt. There are some rumblings out there just concerning some transfers here and there. We will get to those in a second, but let's go to that star that's possibly coming via Pittsburgh, Jordan Addison, in the most ballyhooed of the transfer portal situations, not just because of his playing ability, but because of the circumstances surrounding his entry into the transfer portal. A lot of speculation even before he entered the portal. Pat Narduzzi's whining, griping, concern, however you want to phrase that. Where do you think we stand on Jordan Addison, and do you anticipate any kind of timetable here?
Yeah, I don't have a strong feel for where we stand, and let's keep in mind that I thought that on the recruiting trail, Josh Connerly was signed, sealed, and delivered to USC. Like I was anticipating that. Didn't happen. So many abrupt, jarring plot twists in this offseason. And, of course, an offseason which began at USC the day after the BYU game in late November when Lincoln Riley was hired. We all remember Bruce Feldman tweeting out that USC might take a swing at Lincoln Riley, and I just instantly said, come on, get real. And ever since that Sunday in late November, it's been one plot twist after another. And to be more precise, and for all the people in the comments here at the Voice of College Football, another instance in which I was loudly wrong and in which my suspicions or my inclinations did not prove to be accurate. But that's where we are. We're seeing a new era in college sports. It's something we talked about around a month ago after the Connerly snub of USC when he went to Oregon, that the decisions which might seem logical on paper don't necessarily manifest in reality. I think the pandemic has just created a new culture. I mean, it's given Americans in all walks of life, various professions, just license to go the road less traveled, to do something that before the pandemic they might not have been alerted to, might not have been aware of. But we're living in a new reality, I think, Mark, where people, I think, are more liberated to make, their own choice. They're not following the larger script the culture holds out for them. And so it was very natural and understandable with Jordan Addison, to kind of bring the conversation back to that particular point, that, when rumors surfaced of an NIL deal, that, of course he's not going to say no to Lincoln Riley. Of course he's not going to say no to Los Angeles and the allure of playing with Caleb Williams and this rising juggernaut, back from the ashes, back from the rubble. It just all made sense. It made for a great, convenient story. It also made for a very easy Lincoln Riley as villain story, that here he is muscling in the portal and NIL and in what is basically now pay for play. And he's just going to muscle in, smash and grab Jordan Addison from the clutches of Pittsburgh again, the inclination was very easy, but we talked about this on last week's regular broadcast. Here we are a week later, crickets, nothing's happened. And so you would think that, if you were a conspiracy theorist and you had the inclination to think that, oh, okay, Jordan Addison wasn't going to announce right away after he entered the portal, but maybe just like a few days later after things died down, okay, then he'd announce for USC, just to kind of get everybody off the scent, kind of, lower the temperature in the room to make sure that the conspiracy theories died down. Then maybe like 3 or 4 days later, he'd announce. Hasn't happened. So like that should lead us to think that he really hasn't made up his mind. That if he was trying to play the game and just, was trying to let fears or recriminations from the Pittsburgh side die down, he would have just waited a couple days and then gone ahead and done it. But if he hasn't made an announcement by now, here we are on May 10, that should lead us to think that he really hasn't made his decision. Like, why would you delay it if you knew where you were going to go? And more specifically, from a USC standpoint, if Jordan Addison and Caleb Williams really are that close, and Caleb Williams, by the way, he tweeted, I think it was Fox College Football Twitter, tweeted out, where do you think Jordan Addison should play? Caleb Williams, tweeted USC in response to that over the weekend. I think it was on Saturday, might have been late Friday. But so Caleb Williams is invested in this. You would think that if Jordan Addison really was signed, sealed, and delivered to USC, he would have made the commitment by now. Like, this is not something you should play out. Like, one would think that Jordan Addison would need to get on board, get in the fold, start, having conversations with Lincoln Riley. He could do that if he committed to USC. Why do you protract this process? It just doesn't make sense. So all the notions that this was a fait accompli, that it was already in the cards, it was just a matter of time, it was just a formality, those claims from the Pittsburgh side of the aisle, they don't stack up right now. They don't look very good. They don't look very accurate. So for all the ways in which I've been wrong about various aspects of the coaching carousel and the transfer portal carousel and Josh Connerly, we're just seeing an era in which the thing that makes sense to us logically on the surface doesn't always happen. Actually, it isn't even happening most of the time.
No, it's not. Although, Matt, I got to say, if we take the Caleb Williams situation as an example, we expected that to turn around in a heartbeat from Oklahoma to USC. And that was weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. We are working with a time crunch here, though, in regards to enrolling for class for the summer. I would think he would want to be enrolled for the summer.
Yep.
That's got to be inside a month at the most at this point. I would think something in that range.
You would think, and again, for people who didn't know or don't know, that you had to enroll or you had to put your name in the portal by May 1st, and of course, there's like a 48-hour lag in terms of processing the papers. So, like the Jordan Addison's portal announcement wasn't official until Tuesday, May 3rd. But at any rate, you had to put your name in the portal by May 1st to be able to be eligible to play this fall. So, that just reinforces the point that if, you really value playing this year, okay, so now you need to make your decision and now you need to get situated. Like, yeah, the clock is ticking. And so if you know where you want to play, I mean, what's holding you back? What is the purpose of waiting? There doesn't seem to be any real purpose. So that, again, that reaffirms that Jordan Addison, from every reasonable vantage point, just hasn't made up his mind yet. So I'm not going to predict the future on this one. I'm going to just wait and see. I'm not going to risk another incorrect prediction at this point.
Well, at least you get out there, Matt. You go for it, in terms of taking shots.
Sometimes.
Got to. Well, the two schools that seem to be jumping out there in terms of what I'm seeing, other than USC, would be Texas and Alabama.
Yep.
He
worked out with Bryce Young, so that's a pretty big tell right there.
Yeah, and Alabama, by their standards, are a bit thin at wide receiver. They haven't met that mark this past season that they did. Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, on down the line. That 4 first-round picks in 2 years. And then, of course, they had Mechie and Jameson Williams. They're both gone. And when they weren't in the lineup, they obviously suffered last year. And they've got a loaded room, but it's pretty unproven across the board. So, of course, Addison would be huge for them. Texas, with all their struggles from a wide receiver standpoint, they brought in Xavier Worthy, who was the one-time Michigan commit and signee, and he had a stellar first season for them. And then Ajay Hall, who was a top 50 prospect that played 1 season in Alabama, caught 4 or 5 passes last year. He just transferred to Texas, so they're stocking up as well. So it's an arms race in college football like no other time.
And just, you mentioned Texas. Like, imagine the reaction at USC if Jordan Addison chooses Steve Sarkisian over Lincoln Riley. Yikes! I shudder at the thought. We'll see, but I just shuddered contemplating that.
Got Matt Zemek on the line. We will on a regular basis here for our USC live show every Tuesday, 1 Pacific time, and we hope to bring in some other voices. But if you track what we do with USC football here on this channel wouldn't it existed before Matt, but I got to tell you, it's thriving with Matt here, providing content for us every week.
And this is a live show, so I see a question on our big board here at the Voice of College Football from Ed Rogers. Can USC win 7 games this year? Now, I'm very tempted to call Ed a troll, but I want to value our listeners here on the Voice of College Football and say that, in all fairness, that there is a lot of skepticism about USC. Like we wrote a story at Trojans Wire, picking up a note from USA Today did some preseason rankings, and UCLA is ranked ahead of USC. So that's not some message board denizen. That's USA Today analysis, thinking that, because UCLA has a much better, or at least deeper offensive line than the Trojans do, and UCLA's offensive line, that's one of the Bruins' stronger units on their roster because of that. And also because you have Dorian Thompson-Robinson coming back for 1 more year at quarterback, that offense is going to be good. And that offense probably will be good. But, UCLA has had a Swiss cheese defense, change at defensive coordinator. So, still, you have Lincoln Riley now coaching at USC against Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was able to beat Clay Helton, but this is now very different. So, USC, in my mind, is several notches better than UCLA. But if you are an analyst, and there are some out there who think that UCLA is better than USC, then maybe you will conclude that it's a question as to whether USC is going to win 7 games this year. But I would come back with this point. For all the weaknesses on USC's roster, and we know that USC is very thin, especially on the defensive line, doesn't have as much depth as it would like on the offensive line either, but the defense is going to be especially a point of concern. For all those weaknesses, you have Lincoln Riley coaching and calling offensive plays. You have Caleb Williams at quarterback, an elite Cadillac quarterback, just a top-tier athlete, also a great leader in the locker room, and you have a down Pac-12, and you have a schedule that lines up really well for USC. For those who haven't been paying too close attention to our discussions here at USC and the Voice of College Football over the past few months, if you look at the layout of USC's schedule, the one really tough road game in the conference, other than Utah, that's the obvious big showdown in mid-October in Salt Lake City. The one other really tricky road game is at Corvallis against Oregon State in late September. And if you know USC's history under Pete Carroll, you know that Corvallis was a stumbling block. That was a tough place to win, even for the best Pete Carroll teams. So if USC can grab that win in Corvallis in late September, there's no other landmine type game on the schedule. No other road game in which USC is likely to stumble. Now, it might lose at Utah, but that's a featured game. That's going to be probably an ABC primetime game. But if USC gets past the OSU game, it's going to be hard for this team to not go 8-1. Like if USC wins that OSU game, where are the other losses coming from in the Pac-12? USC doesn't play Oregon, doesn't play Washington on the schedule rotation this year. And, Arizona State has cratered in terms of recruiting, in terms of transfer portal exits. So that's no longer a tough game. Washington State might be moderately difficult. The Cougars did have a good finish to their season last year, but that game's at home. So, if that was in Pullman, that would have been a little bit thorny. But, just show me where the other losses are. They're not going to lose to Arizona. They're not going to lose to UCLA. They're not going to lose to Colorado. Just where Stanford, that in week 2, maybe that becomes a little bit problematic only because of the rust that USC has and the uncertainty of getting used to Lincoln Riley's system. But did you see Stanford last year? Did you see Stanford play last year? That team hit rock bottom under David Shaw. And of course, he got a good recruiting class in, but you have a lot of young pups then that Shaw has to bring along. So playing USC in week 2, that's not good for Stanford. It does not line up well for the Cardinal precisely because of how green they are throughout their roster. They have so many uncertainties, so many unproven players. They would love to have played USC in November this year, but they get them in week 2. So I don't see that Stanford game as being particularly threatening for USC. So Ed, maybe you were being sincere. Will USC win 7 games? Maybe you were being a troll, but so I've laid it out, directly, straight, no BS. USC is going to find it hard to not win at least at the absolute floor 7-2 in the Pac-12. How is USC going to lose at least 3 conference games against that schedule? I mean, it's just not going to happen.
Well, as Cheryl indicated in the chat, Ed is one of our loyal viewers here at the Voice of College Football. So not necessarily a troll. I think he likes to poke a little bit, though.
Definitely a poke and a prod, yes. And that's okay. It's the off season, and of course, this stuff is supposed to be fun. So Ed, again, I took your question seriously. I mentioned the possibility that you were just trying to have mischief, but I did take your question seriously, and I just explained why 7 wins is not the floor. It's more like 9. 9 wins is the floor for this team in 2022.
We always appreciate Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire. Head on over to Trojans Wire. Catch Matt Works right there as we talk USC football. Matt has joined us here at the Voice of College Football. So we've had a recording time every Tuesday for months and months and months and months. And then you've seen the segments roll out. And we just figured, hey, let's do this live, take questions from all of you, and get this ramped up. So we appreciate Matt committing to that. Here's a question for you, Matt, in regards to something that you've addressed many times in regards to, what's the offensive bar from a standpoint of being prolific, 35 points per game, and what did this defense have to do just enough to make this kind of the season the Lincoln Riley's looking for? So 35 for the offense, 30 for the defense.
Yeah, Oscar, great pair of questions. It's something we've talked about the last few months here at the Voice of College Football, and I think if USC hits those benchmarks, average 36 scored and allow 29, that's going to be a very successful season, most likely. And it could be that USC is going to score, 75 points against Rice in week 1, and that might skew the statistics. But on balance, if USC generally hits the benchmark of averaging mid to upper 30s in points and allowing very high 20s in points, it's probably going to work out well. They might lose a couple 1-point games, which would be a real gut punch, but probably it's going to be a very good season for USC. And I think as I contemplate what will actually happen, I think the defense might check in allowing 31 or 32, but I think that the offense can score about 38 and average about 38. So even then, you have about a +7 differential on a per game basis. And I think if USC gets there, it's probably going to be good. But I think if the season-long differentials are closer to a field goal than a touchdown, maybe think 35, 32, that's probably where another loss gets into the equation. And what could be a 10-2 year becomes a 9-3 year. So that's my overall sense. So I worry about the defense because there just aren't enough reinforcements right now along the defensive line. They just need so many more bodies. You also have to consider the reality that Corey Foreman is behind schedule in his evolution. So, he might become a great player midway through the season, but I don't think he's going to be a great player in week one. There's going to be an acclimation period. That's also why I keep going back to that Oregon State game. Also, the placement of that game on the calendar in week 4, you might not see USC players at the stage in their evolutionary arcs where they're fully ready, fully prepared for what is a very good Oregon State offensive line. So that game, to me, again, it stands out as the challenge that if USC can surmount that, the rest of the season lines up well. Players are going to develop. They're going to get better in October and November. So, Oscar, great question. And I think that the Oregon State game might, be the game that really shapes those statistics more than any other this season.
Like to let everyone know that we're simulcasting on the main channel, but we're also on the USC channel. Going forward, we'll just be on the USC channel, and the other team channels have been very well in regards to these live streams, but just want to let everyone know that we'll be on the USC channel exclusively going forward. So Willie, he's another regular here. So Willie, we need to correct a few things here. Caleb Williams threw 21 touchdown passes. So you're close there. 21 touchdowns, 4 picks, which is one of the best ratios in the country last year. Plus, he's a dynamic runner, Willie. Also, he was not benched for Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler was benched for Caleb Williams, who saved Oklahoma and Lincoln Riley's hide against Texas down by 3 touchdowns at halftime of that game, 28-7. Threw 5 touchdown passes and won that game going away, kept the job the rest of the season. So it was Williams replacing Rattler. And
Willie, you're predicting that USC is going to lose 3 games. Well, let me tell you, if USC goes 11-2 and wins the Pac-12, and then that 3rd loss comes in the bowl game, hey, I'll sign up for that. That would be a successful season at USC, winning the Pac-12 and then losing game 3 in the bowl. So that's my workaround. Now, if you're predicting USC is going to go 9-3 in the 12-game season, yeah, that would be a little bit disappointing for the Trojans. And again, it's going to come down to their defensive front because, if USC gets gashed on a regular basis, that means other teams are controlling the ball, they're controlling the clock. Caleb Williams is not getting as many plays and possessions per game. That's going to be the most direct path to beating USC this season. So USC needs to beef up on the defensive line. So like if USC doesn't make a few splashes in the transfer portal along its defensive line, yeah, that's gonna keep a lot of 3 and 4 loss predictions flowing in from various corners of the country.
Matt, the real MVP is bringing up something that a lot of people take one side of this argument in regards to, okay, does the easy schedule pave the way for a college football playoff or the inferior conference, or is it being in the better conference where the committee is going to look at an extra loss as not as being credible because of the toughness and difficulty of the schedule? So what do you think about USC's path in regards to how legitimate this schedule is going to be perceived by the committee?
Well, the first thing you have to look at in the Pac-12 conference is that the Pac-12 has struggled to create 12-1 or 13-0 champions. So often you get like a 1-loss Oregon or a 1-loss Utah getting into late November and they stub their toe, right? And so they get that second loss and they're eliminated from playoff discussion. So my starting point, the real MVP, is let's just get a 12-1 team, all right? Because we haven't had that. So Washington in 2016 was a 12-1 team and got in. So let's just get there and then test that theory about whether a 12-1 team will get in. Now, in terms of diving in a little deeper on that, it obviously goes to what are the other teams doing? Do you have a 2-loss Georgia? Does Georgia somehow pick up 2 losses at some point in the season while you have SEC champion Alabama unbeaten? Or can Georgia go 12-1? That is an obvious tension point. And then Ohio State, at 12-1 probably is in very good shape for a playoff berth, but losing twice, that would also change the conversation. Is Notre Dame now? Well, Notre Dame, you have Notre Dame and USC playing in late November. So in that case, If USC has a win over Notre Dame in late November, Notre Dame is really good. Like, let's say that's an all top 10 matchup on Thanksgiving weekend and USC wins it. That's going to be a big poker chip for Lincoln Riley and the Trojans. And of course, we saw that Cincinnati, by beating Notre Dame head to head, like that gave Cincinnati the unique leverage to get into the playoff. If Cincinnati had beaten another top 10 team, not Notre Dame, the Irish might have gotten in, but because Cincinnati had that specific head-to-head advantage, it was impossible for the committee, read ESPN, to pull the strings and get Notre Dame in. Cincinnati had that trump card, and it was an airtight seal against the Irish. So USC could have that same airtight seal in a possible debate for the fourth playoff seed. So there are a lot of particularities that attach to this particular season that could go in USC's favor. But again, to kind of broaden the picture again on this particular debate, the Pac-12 has not produced many 12-1 conference champions. That's why it's working on a 6-year college football playoff drought. Everyone in the Pac-12, everyone who covers football in the Pac-12, everyone who wants to see the Pac-12 succeed at the highest level in college football, George Kliavkoff on down, they know we just need to get a 12-1 conference champion again, because that's been the dry spell, which is what's caused this massive playoff zero since 2016.
And unfortunately for the Pac-12, the last time a team did reach the playoff from the Pac-12 was 2016, and most people believe that not to even be the best team in the Pac-12 at that point. Washington played basically a nondescript. I think Rutgers was their big non-conference game, went through the Pac-12, beat a pretty mediocre Colorado team that was just, had a spike of a year in the Pac-12 championship game. And USC beat them by 2 touchdowns and was red hot by the end of the year. Of course, with Sam Darnold, won the Rose Bowl and was a team that everybody wanted to see, in terms of fans wanted to see in the playoff that year. Nobody wanted to see USC as an opponent on the field, though.
Let me interject. So one thing we covered here at Trojans Wire over the past week, which is germane to this particular conversation, our friend John Wilner of the Wilner Hotline at the San Jose Mercury News. And for those watching us here on the Voice of College Football who don't follow the Pac-12 very closely on a day-in, day-out basis, you want to follow John Wilner. Has his finger on the pulse of the conference, one of the best reporters and insiders covering all of Pac-12 athletics. So he came out with a column last week saying that he expects a change in the Pac-12 championship games format as early as next year, as early as 2023, in which the Pac-12 is going to scrap the 2-division format and go to the Big 12 model of the top 2 teams in the conference. So like that has definite implications, Mark, for what you just pointed out, that you want to get your 2 best teams in. You want to have the elites. You want to have the hot teams playing at the end of the season so that you don't have, a 3-loss Colorado or some other team in that championship game. It's also, of course, the dynamic that the ACC has had with Clemson beating a 4 or 5-loss tomato can in Charlotte most years. Obviously, you didn't have that last year, but most years that's been the case. So the Pac-12 is probably going to get away from the divisional format, and it's a great move because you do want the 2 best teams in your conference. You don't want that artificial barrier created by divisions. So, and it's interesting that USC could really use that new format this year because USC and Utah, in my mind at least, are clearly the 2 best teams in the conference. Some will say Oregon is in the mix, but if you do accept the idea that USC and Utah are 1 and 2, regardless of order, then a divisionless Pac-12 title game format would really help the Trojans. But because that format's not going to be in place this year, if USC loses that game in Salt Lake City, the Trojans might get boxed out of the Pac-12 title game, and it's going to be Oregon, even though the Trojans might be better than the Ducks this season.
This is our first edition, folks. USC Live right here at the Voice of College Football. And we couldn't do it without Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire, so we appreciate him. We record every week. Now we're going to go live, and so you can count on us here every Tuesday. And again, we're looking for sponsorship. Also, hit the like button and let people know that we're here. every Tuesday as well. Share that link out on social media. Jermaine Lowell is the 24th rated strong side defensive end in the country, roughly top 500 player, had committed to Arizona State. I know you had mentioned to me, Matt, before we jumped on, that there were some rumblings concerning some players from Arizona State. Of course, Eric Gentry was a player that USC's already received via transfer portal from Arizona State and Utah. And was he one of them? Do you have any insight into Jermaine Lowell?
Yeah, so Paul references the question, is he not coming to USC due to academic reasons? So I can tell you, Paul, that Antonio Morales, the fine USC beat writer at The Athletic, very good, very respected among the USC community, among USC fans. Yeah, he has a source telling him that USC is out of the running. Now, I haven't seen that picked up by other outlets and other reporters, but Antonio Morales has definitely said that USC is not in the hunt for Jermaine Lowell because of academic particularities. So that there is something to that story.
Just here in the last 24 hours, Matt, of course, quarterback Dylan Raiola, the number 1 rated quarterback in the country, according to, depending on your service, number 3 in the composite out of Arizona. He has committed to Ohio State 2024. That commitment, shoot, that's a long ways away to wrap up a commitment there. So there could be some tug of war going on between now and signing day. But how close is USC to Raiola? Is he one of their targets? Is he in the running there at USC?
I mean, he was definitely on the radar, but I don't think USC fans are going to lose a whole lot of sleep on this because you have Malachi Nelson, waiting in the wings as the successor to Caleb Williams. So, I got 99 problems. If we attach that to USC, USC has 99 problems. Quarterback ain't one.
Yes, for sure. For sure. We are seeing, and you've partially answered this question with some of your wins projections about, sizing up the schedule versus USC talent, plus a few deficiencies held over from the 21 season, i.e. the defense and as a whole. And certainly check out the videos that we posted with Matt. We ran through every position unit, offense and defense, as they look coming out of spring practice here. Where would you rank this team, regardless of schedule, taking into account these huge gains in talent, where we're looking at the number 1 transfer portal team in the nation with 15 commits, and there are 15 quality commits, but they had a lowly rated recruiting class, not because of the talent of the team, but they only had 8 commits. You throw it all together, they're number 9 in the composite in terms of rankings for 2022. Where do you think this team stacks up nationally among the top 25 teams or so?
Yeah. So, taking USC out of the Pac-12, which, again, has been a down conference in recent years. And that's why I'm high on USC in terms of its schedule. But if you take that schedule and the Pac-12 specific piece out of the puzzle, Mark, I'd say that USC is probably top 15. I'd say that's about right for how this program stacks up on a national level, because the established powers, especially in the SEC and Big Ten, like they have the machine rolling. They know exactly what they're about. They know exactly what they need to do. And they're a notch better, I think, than USC is. I mean, that's where USC's depth, or lack thereof, more precisely, would put the Trojans at a real disadvantage compared to the Ryan Days and Kirby Smarts and Nick Sabans, who have, that established pipeline, who are able to just regularly reload. Like Lincoln Riley isn't really reloading. He's trying to just build something from scratch, build it from the transfer portal. That's where Clay Helton's damage to the program would show up. So I'm reluctant to say USC is a top 10 program, but I think top 15 is about right. And I do put USC at the top of the Pac-12 because, again, and this is not a slight against Utah. It's just a reflection of the competition that you go against. That Utah crushed Oregon twice last year because Oregon was significantly flawed at quarterback and other key positions We've talked a lot here on the Voice of College Football about Pac-12 quarterback play being really bad in 2021. And so USC getting the instant upgrade with Caleb Williams, and you marry him with Lincoln Riley's savvy as a play caller. And that is just such a massive instant upgrade in quality that it's going to lift USC above all the other programs in the Pac-12 conference. Nationally, but the superpowers in the various other conferences, with the possible exception of Clemson, USC is definitely below those programs. And you just, while we're on that subject, I mean, there are a few more interesting comparisons than USC and Clemson, because you have Clemson with like the infrastructure and the depth that USC lacks, but then USC has the quarterback play that Clemson lacks. And it's going to be a really big point of intrigue this year if Dabo can solve the yips problem for DJ Uiagalelei. And so, like, when you put USC and Clemson together, it's like the yin and the yang. That USC has what Clemson lacks, Clemson has what USC lacks, but they both aren't complete teams because they both have that one glaring deficiency. Imagine a team with all the depth of Clemson up front and Caleb Williams. Imagine, USC, on the other side of the divide. It's just really fascinating to put those two programs together if we're into national comparisons for college football this coming season.
Yeah, Clemson had a top 3 or 4 defense in the country last year, and unlike Georgia, they didn't get ripped to shreds. And I don't even expect Georgia's play on defense to suffer much. And that's ridiculous to think about losing the kind of talent that they did. But Clemson retained their talent on defense. But can that just remarkable defense lift an offense where DJ was marginal at best, to be kind? The offensive line.
He was Rick Ankiel. He was Chuck Knobloch. Just couldn't
Yes.
throw the ball. Hey, this is a really interesting question here from Tim Prangley.
Yep.
So USC playing Utah, what's the benefit of doing it twice? How did it work out for Alabama this past season? A reference to, no divisions in the conference championship game, and they're therefore having rematches between teams that would normally play each other in the regular season. Well, let me address how did it work out for Alabama? Alabama would be national champion if Jameson Williams didn't get hurt against Georgia. And Alabama won the SEC championship, and Alabama was playing in the national championship game. That's pretty good in my book. And if you were to tell a USC fan right now that we'll be in the national championship game, if that's the cost of playing Utah twice, hey, we'll take it. We'll sign on the dotted line if you have a contract offer for us. So how did it work out for Alabama? Not too badly. And really it was injuries more than Georgia, which decided that game. I mean, not that Georgia didn't earn it, not that Stetson Bennett didn't earn it, not that the Bulldogs didn't deserve it for all their hard work and how they took control of that game in the second half. But, Alabama was in control of that game in the first 15, 20 minutes, and, forces beyond the Tide's control certainly shifted the Tide. That doesn't take anything away from Georgia, but like Alabama was not dominated from start to finish. Let's just put it that way in the title game. Alabama had its chances, had its opportunities. So if that's like the sticking point in terms of playing a conference opponent twice in the regular season, hey, USC fans certainly should not be worried about that. If losing in the national title game becomes a recurring thing at USC, the 2006 Rose Bowl was a traumatic experience for USC fans. There's no question about it. It still stings 16 years later. But if that becomes the new normal, hey, we'll sign up for that. Like we can take that. Like we've lived through Clay Helton for 7 years.
With that,
we lived through Lane Kiffin. We lived through Sark. We lived through 7-loss Sark, who's now at Texas. We'll take being number 2 in the country on an annual basis. We'll accept that.
Yeah. Deal with that issue when it becomes an issue. If it becomes
a first world problem. We are up for that here at USC. Believe me.
My take on the whole Georgia-Alabama situation without the two receivers, Mechie and then Williams, is that you can't discredit Georgia. They won the national championship fair and square. It wasn't like there was some blown call at the end of the game or anything like that. Is it reasonable for an Alabama fan to say, hey, I think we would have won the national championship if we had John Mechie and Jamison Williams? Absolutely. I have no issue with an Alabama fan saying that. I do have an issue with, I've had Alabama fans come on and say, that it's a foregone conclusion it would have happened. Well,
Yeah,
we don't
please.
know. We
Yeah.
don't know. I have no issue with you saying you believe that it would have happened,
Yeah,
but
of course.
you can't say give us a national championship because we would have won it.
Of course.
Injuries are part of the sport.
Absolutely. Injuries are part of the sport. We're seeing this in the NBA with Ja Morant against the Golden State Warriors. We know it's a big influencer of the outcome, but that doesn't mean the other team doesn't deserve it. I mean, it's that simple. I hope we know how to talk about injuries in sports, at least at that fundamental level.
Tim, I think the end result's pretty much the same, but he's talking about a regular season game and then a Pac-12 championship game. How does that serve USC if they've got to run into Utah twice? Well, one way it serves them is just to get them into the championship game if they are the 2 seed in the conference and also the 2 seed in their division. They're out.
Yeah. So Tim, okay. So tackling it from that vantage point, I mean, Georgia and Alabama played twice last year, once in the regular season, once in the SEC championship game, and then once in the national championship game. They didn't play in the 12-game regular season. That was the year before. They met in Tuscaloosa in the regular season, but not last year. So that's why I responded to your question with a postseason scenario. But to address your point, okay, you play in the normal 12-game regular season, and then as the second meeting in the conference championship game. Let's just address that through a 2022 lens. So let's say USC loses the regular season game in Salt Lake City. Well, if you have a divisionless format, USC can still make the title game, and then you get the revenge opportunity against Utah. And usually, getting the second bite at the apple, the second chance to beat a specific opponent, that second time is usually going to go better than the first time. And, we saw this with Georgia and Alabama last year, even though they didn't meet in the actual regular season. So USC would welcome the chance to get revenge if it loses in Salt Lake City in mid-October. But then let's flip the scenario. Let's say USC wins in Salt Lake City and then has to play Utah again in the conference championship game. Well, what does that mean? It means if USC beats Utah a second time, it's not going to be easy, but you're playing Utah. You're not playing, let's say, a 4-loss Oregon team. You're not playing a 4-loss Washington team. You're playing potentially 11-1 Utah, with Utah's only loss being to USC. So if you beat Utah a second time, what does that mean? It means you get playoff leverage if it's a close debate, if it's a close call. So the benefit of sweeping Utah, playoff leverage. The benefit of getting a second chance at Utah after losing in the regular season, if you're going to map out that particular avenue, then you get a better chance of winning that revenge match and getting the Pac-12 championship. And if you don't make the playoff, you make the Rose Bowl, which, USC has made just one Rose Bowl in the past 13 years. Hey, if USC makes the Rose Bowl this year, if you're to tell me, hey, Matt, USC is going to be in the Rose Bowl, do you take that deal no matter what else is going on? Yes. We've been away for so long. This has no longer been the USC standard since Pete Carroll left. Yes, we'll take the Rose Bowl happily, gleefully, and then we can build to 2023 and 2024. A Rose Bowl would certainly lift recruiting. It would lift all the things that Lincoln Riley is trying to restore here at USC. Then in 2023, 2024, you get more depth. You get even better recruiting than what we've already had, which has been substantial. And then you're at a level where you can win national championships. So, Tim, really, I think the benefits completely outweigh the negatives and the possible pitfalls of this hypothetical. Your disagreement is noted, for the record.
I think the scenarios change every year, and the situation for all teams and for all the scenarios that anybody can draw to say, hey, I want the conference championship to change this way, or I want the playoff to change that way. And the only thing that they're contemplating and thinking is such and such happened last year and I didn't like it. Therefore, we need to change it just based on that scenario. That is not being forward thinking and taking all variables into account.
It's one of the great trap doors in college football argumentation and debate, because one year, you're the one-loss conference champion, and next year, the other team is, and you have the 2 losses, but the better strength of schedule. That's like the LSU Oregon debate from about a decade ago, or also Stanford, Oregon and Stanford had some debates as well along those lines. Yeah. So what happens one year, next year it boomerangs back and you're on the other side of the fence and you're just left there arguing the other position that, 12 months earlier you were defending. Like, that goes nowhere. You have to deal with broader architectures and more consistent principles in college football argumentation.
Yes. Could Utah and USC tie for the division championship and Utah win head-to-head, because they are playing at Salt Lake City, correct, this year?
Yes, they are. It's in Salt Lake City.
So could USC be left out because of that? Absolutely. And then you would want, as a USC fan, for that to be structured as one conference and not 2 divisions, so you get into the championship. Can it be another year in which USC is the best team in the conference and Utah is the second best team in the conference, and USC would have to beat them twice, and that would be a difficult assignment versus playing, there are all sorts of structures in which we see the third best team in a conference be decidedly worse than the second best team. Sure, it can work both ways. Absolutely.
Yep. Uncle Rico, this is a very interesting point. So Utah went toe-to-toe with the best offense in the country last year. They will handle USC this year. Well, first off, it's in Salt Lake City, probably going to be a night game. It's very hard to win in Eccles Rice Stadium at night. So, hey, Utah's probably going to be like a field goal favorite entering that game, and it certainly would not be a surprise if Utah beats USC. But I will make the point, as I've made before, that Utah was able to crush an opponent with Anthony Brown at quarterback. We're talking about Oregon. And Caleb Williams is a totally different league of quality and brilliance for a defense compared to Anthony Brown. And I just think that level of elevation in talent is so stratospheric that that's going to give USC a real chance against Utah. And nothing against Cam Rising, like, he was terrific. And of course, he relieved Charlie Brewer, stepped right in, instantly transformed that offense. Like, Utah was a juggernaut on offense in the latter half of the Pac-12 season. So that is certainly an offense which could tear USC's defense to shreds. But if it's a pure firefight, if it's a computer game, if it's like one of those Baker Mayfield, Patrick Mahomes, Big 12 style shootouts where we get into the 50s, like, I like Caleb Williams' chances against Cam Rising. And that's not a knock on Cam Rising. It just is a testament to my belief that Caleb Williams has the higher ceiling. Maybe Cam Rising has the higher floor, but the higher ceiling, Caleb Williams is the highest ceiling quarterback in the Pac-12. So that's the argument for USC. But Utah has a more established veteran team, defending Pac-12 champion, going to be at home. Like, that is clearly the toughest Pac-12 game on USC's schedule. And if Notre Dame trips up, it's the toughest game on USC's schedule overall this coming season.
I'm amused by this comment by Jetneck. USC is going to be 12-1, and they're going to send them to the Holiday Bowl. That's not even a mid-tier, but they're going to, relegate them to the where they're going to relegate them to Memphis or somewhere to play a bowl game, I guess.
If we're a one-loss program this year, hey, we'll take that. And if that means being craptastic, hey, if we're the most craptastic one-loss program in the country, sign me up. I will gladly accept that if you want to attach that label to it.
Thank you, Uncle Rico. I couldn't think of I've been not thinking of bowl games for a few months. I couldn't think of a third-rate type of bowl game. There you go, the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Even though I don't think the
The Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl, I think, would be under the
Yes.
Pac-12
There you go. I
contractual
was gonna say
umbrella
the
of
affiliations don't
obligations.
work
Yeah.
out for the Duke's
Yeah.
Mayo Bowl, but
Yeah.
point well taken, Uncle Rico. All right, good stuff. Appreciate everybody being here for our USC live show. We're going to be here every Tuesday, and we've got Matt to thank in terms of providing us with the analysis, and I'll be here as well, and we'll bring some other voices in from time to time, but Matt has contributed so much to us in building this USC channel, and please join his work. We'll get his post up here on the banner. Matt Zemek at Trojans Wire. And please subscribe to our USC channel if you're going to take in the content, because YouTube doesn't like it if you just subscribe to the channel to be nice to me and then you don't like the content. They want active subscribers. So please do that if you're a USC fan, or hey, just a college football fan that want to keep up with the big brands. Check out our content there. And again, Trojans Wire with Matt.
So it's not enough to center the ball for that final field goal. You have to get the laces out. You have to go through all the fundamentals, and you have to make sure the kicker is comfortable with all the situation. So it's not just a one-step process. It's a multi-step process here at the Voice of College Football.
Absolutely right. Paul, we appreciate you being here as a USC fan. And as you can tell, Matt, this is probably a bit different than some of your other experiences with your podcast and so forth, where it's all USC. We range all over the place from college football fan bases.
So for those who don't know me, like I joined College Football News back in the day with Pete Fiutak, Rich Sermonello in 2001. So like I've been covering college football nationally for about 20 years and love the sport, have a good awareness of what's going on across the nation. Like I don't know like everything about every program, but I know a lot about every program. I know something about every program, and it's really been great to dive a little deeper at USC and Trojans Wire and get into that mode of, understanding one program in greater depth and detail. I want to mention one thing about our coverage at Trojans Wire. On Memorial Day weekend and through June and July, the kind of the quiet period before August camp, we have an extended podcast series where we're gonna do a deep dive into Lincoln Riley from an Oklahoma expert who's really studied him closely at OU, and we're just going to get a lot of insights, quotes, analysis, history, context, the controversies, his play calling, film room. We have an extensive series laid out that we're going to launch around Memorial Day weekend. So that's what you're going to want to follow at Trojans Wire in June and July. So just wanted to get that across, kind of just whet the appetite for people who are interested in learning more about Trojans Wire and about Lincoln Riley. This is our off season to really educate not just the fan base, but ourselves as we cover USC football as the Lincoln Riley era begins at USC.
And I certainly think with this Jordan Addison situation, it's been easy for the college football fan. I'm not talking about the Pitt specific fan or the USC fan, but the college football fan to villainize Lincoln Riley, to say, yes, we didn't like how he left Oklahoma and he did them wrong, and now he's doing this wrong too. And I don't know. I don't want to. I'm not going to take sides in it because we don't know all the facts and everything involved. But we know that that coaches are pursuing players, and that's going on all across the nation.
Yeah, and you know what? To talk about that for a moment, because I think it's worth discussing. In terms of Lincoln Riley's own behavior, here's my one basic problem with Lincoln Riley. But this doesn't make him unique among coaches. I think that what the problem with Lincoln Riley is a problem shared by most other coaches in the sport. It's that when something goes well, then everything's great. But when something goes badly for them, then they talk about the evils of the system and all the flaws and all the problems. Hey, you're making millions of dollars. I'm talking not just about Lincoln Riley. I'm talking about any high-profile coach, football or basketball. You are getting paid millions of dollars to do something that you love, to do something that you're really good at. We know it's a flawed and broken system, but just minimize the belly aching and the moaning and about how this is tearing apart the fabric of society, or it's destroying college sports as we know it. Please, as though there wasn't, illicit or unethical activity 50, 60 years ago. I mean, hey, at USC, we know that, John Wooden over at UCLA, he had Sam Gilbert. Not to throw too much shade on the rival Bruins, but of course, that's an obvious representative example to use. Let's just not pretend that it was this oasis of purity and virtue and honor 50, 60 years ago, and that only now is this a real problem, and it's detracting from our enjoyment of the sport. Hey, you like college football, you come here to the Voice of College Football to discuss the sport in early May. You're obviously a diehard fan. You're not going to stop watching college football because of this NIL stuff. Be honest with yourself. And so I ask that of Lincoln Riley and other coaches, Pat Narduzzi, the whole lot, that, it's a bad system, and that certainly needs to be reformed, but let's not make too much of an issue about it, because the transfer portal and these other ways to acquire players these days, these are paying coaches salaries. These are leading to wins on the field. Just to consider basketball for a very brief second, Remy Martin was a transfer from Arizona State. Without him, Kansas and Bill Self don't win the national title. So Bill Self, please don't knock the portal when it's helping you win a second national championship. That's the thing that drives me nuts. But to kind of circle back to the Lincoln Riley as villain thing, like, he didn't start these problems. He's not the ultimate embodiment of these problems. This is something that's pervasive to the sport. Everyone's dealing with it. The problems with, recruiting through the transfer portal and tampering, a coach, will just kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, tell a player, to recruit another player. Like, that's been going on for a long time. So to say that this is a unique Lincoln Riley problem, get out of here. I don't want to hear that. All right. Like, he is not like the poster child for what's wrong. You can say that he's working the gray areas. Fine. So does John Calipari at Kentucky. So do all the various coaches in college football and basketball at the top tier of the sport. Let's not make this into a one-person problem. This is an NCAA problem, and that's the thing that everybody should be able to agree on.
Well, we're going to have future weeks and shows to dive into this further, of course, and there's going to be more to specifically deal with as this rolls out. But I'll bring up two issues that I think the general fan has, and I think one's legit and one's not, at least from my perspective. One is that there's something unique to college athletics and college football, since we focus on that detach it from professional, and that's that your players will always be your players. When we watch Monday Night Football, when we watch an NFL game, and those players are ripping off their school and announcing the starting lineup, there's a sense of pride for the college football fan that Rodney Peete always played at USC, never played anywhere else. And Todd Marinva, USC, name your player. It was very rare that a significant player played at multiple schools in the past. So you could always take that player and say he was always a Buckeye, always a Trojan, always a Longhorn. And that's going away. It's going to be, we're not going to see many of those players 10 years from now watching NFL games. The other part of that, and so I think that's a legit, there was a, regardless of what was going on behind the scenes, there was a purity to that in terms of loyalty. The one thing that's ironic is that it seems like there was a groundswell of support for NIL in regards to, well, these kids should be making money. Their blood, sweat, and tears are going into the workouts and everything they have to do to play the games, and risking injury. And the big wigs in the suits are making all the money. They need a portion of this. Well, now that they're getting that opportunity, people are against it. I think people are uncomfortable once the dollar amount becomes a certain. We always tend to, in America, I believe, think that everyone at our level or below, they're making reasonable amounts of money. But when somebody makes considerably more than us, that to us, well, that's a lot of money. If you're making $50,000, $100,000 is a lot of money. But if you're making $100,000, that's not a lot of money. $200,000 is a lot of money, and on and on and on. And really, that's not the American way, and that's not the marketplace. The marketplace is you make what you make based on supply and demand.
Well, not to get into religion specifically, Mark, but we know the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, right? Where the vineyard owner gave these workers a specific wage early in the day, and it was a good wage, it was a fair wage, paid them well. But then, late in the afternoon, he needed some more laborers to finish the day of work before sunset. So they got a really good wage, but for fewer hours spent. But hey, you got your good deal. So what if someone else gets what might be a comparatively better deal? You were offered a deal. You liked it. You thought it was fair. You thought you were treated well. So if someone else gets paid even more money, at least in terms of a per hour rate later in the day, why should that be your concern? And so that's the real point here, is that, are people being treated more fairly? That's what we should be focused on. Getting into these unique one-time or one-player comparisons, that is the road to dissatisfaction. But if we think we get a good deal at 10 a.m. and someone else gets an even better deal at 3 p.m., should that change the feeling that we got a really good deal at 10 a.m.? It shouldn't.
Yeah, I think most of us can relate to the workplace situation where certain people are certainly perfectly fine with their salary or their bonus until they find out what somebody else is making or what somebody else's bonus was. There you go.
No doubt.
USC Trojans live here every Tuesday, 4 Eastern, 1 Pacific. Matt Zemek makes it all happen. Check out his work at Trojans Wire. Matt, we appreciate this. And again, everyone, make it on back next week. Bring some folks with you, and let's make this work. We would like to sustain this. So please do all those things that we count on. Hit the like button, share the videos, tell people that we're here, and here at the Voice of College Football. Matt, we appreciate it. It was great, and hope to see you next week, as always.
Absolutely. So when you call the timeout, call 2 plays in the huddle, not just one. You got to subscribe and like. Take both steps, not just one.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
You bet.